Hey guys, tonight we are heading back, way back, to 11th century Spain, a place of scorching sun, glittering swords, and a hero whose career, rather unconventional for his enemies, didn't stop when his heart did. We're talking about the one and only El Cid. No, this isn't your typical, squeaky clean hero's story. This is a story about loyalty, exile, and hell, with a bit of creative thinking from his very clever wife. A corpse on a horse can still win one for the team. Let's be honest. Dropped into this world with your modern sensibilities, you'd probably get a splinter from a wooden carton that would be the end of you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop me a comment and let me know what city you're listening from, and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's seize into 2 nights' journey together. Take a deep breath. The first thing you notice isn't a sight, but a feeling. The sun. It's a heavy, white-hot presence on your skin, taking the very air you breathe. You're standing on a dusty, paved road in what will one day be called Spain. But right now, in the middle of the 11th century, it's not one country. It's a chaotic, beautiful, and dangerous patchwork quilt of competing kingdoms. Look around you, to the north. You can almost feel the rugged, rocky ambition of the Christian kingdoms Leon, Castile, Aragon, Diapur, Tof, and fueled by a fervent faith and a desire to reclaim the lands their Visigothic ancestors lost centuries ago. Their castles are blocky, functional fortresses. Their knights are covered in mail, and their faith is as solid and unyielding as the mountains they call home. Now, turn your gaze south. The air feels different here. It's scented with orange blossoms, roasting lamb, and exotic spices you can't quite name. This is Al-Andalus, the Muslim-ruled portion of the Iberian Peninsula. But the great, unified Caliphate of Cordoba, a beacon of science, poetry, and architecture, has recently shattered. In its place are dozens of smaller, independent city-states called tifas. These tifas, ruled by emirs, are often fabulously wealthy and culturally sophisticated. Their cities boast libraries, public baths, and mosques with intricate, hypnotic tile work. But they are also rivals, constantly scheming, fighting, and forming fragile alliances with each other and, when it suits them, with the Christian kings to the north. This is the central tension of your new world, the so-called Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of the peninsula. But don't imagine a simple, clear-cut line in the sun with Christians on one side and Muslims on the other. It's so much messier than that. A Christian king might hire a Muslim mercenary army to fight his Christian cousin. A Muslim emir might pay tribute to a Christian lord for protection against his Muslim neighbor. Alliances shift like desert sands. Loyalty is a currency, and it's spent and earned on a daily basis. Here's a little detail that might surprise you. Amidst all this conflict, there's a strange kind of coexistence. You might see a Christian scholar in Toledo studying Arabic translations of Greek philosophy, texts that have been lost to the rest of Europe. You might hear a Mosque Arab that's a Christian living under Muslim rule speaking a Romance dialect laced with Arabic words. Jewish poets, doctors, and administrators serve in both Christian and Muslim courts, acting as vital intermediaries. This complex interplay of cultures is a fascinating and often overlooked part of the era. Of course, historians are still in a massive, multi-generational argument about this very thing. Was this a golden age of convivency, a Spanish word meaning coexistence or living together, where the 3 great Abrahamic faiths created a unique and tolerant society, or is that just a romantic myth? And the reality was a deeply segregated and suspicious world where tolerance was merely a pragmatic, temporary truce, easily broken by the next power-hungry warlord. The truth, as it usually is probably somewhere messily in between. It was both. A place of stunning cultural fusion and brutal, unforgiving warfare. This is the world you've woken up in. A land of poets and warriors, of piety and pragmatism. A place where a man's worth is measured by the strength of his sword arm and the sharpness of his wits. It's a land of opportunity for someone with enough ambition and skill to navigate its treacherous currents, and is into this vibrant, violent, and complicated world that a baby is about to be born, in a minor noble house in the kingdom of Castile. A boy who would grow up to embody all of its contradictions, its brutality, and its strange, enduring honor. A boy named Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar. The world snaps back into focus, and you find yourself in a small, unremarkable village called Vivar, a stone's throw from the city of Burgos. The house you're looking at isn't a grand palace, it's a solid, defensible stone house, the home of a minor nobleman named Diego Lainez. He's what they call an infans on a member of the lower nobility. He has a title and a bit of land. But his family's wealth and status aren't measured in gold coins, but in military reputation. His son, Rodrigo, is born into a world where your last name gets you in the door, but the strength of your sword arm is what keeps you in the room. Let's meet him. As a boy, he's not poring over books. His classroom is a dusty patch of ground behind the house, and his lessons are taught with the jarring clang of steel. You watch him, unwary, energetic kid, learning to handle a sword that's almost as tall as he is. He learns to ride a horse before he can properly write his own name. He learns how to read the terrain, where to find cover, how to ford a river, where an enemy might lay in ambush. His education is entirely, brutally practical. The poetry and philosophy of the southern chief might as well be on the moon. Here, in Castile, a man needs to know how to fight. Everything else is a luxury. Here's a small detail to ground you in his reality. His famous name, Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, isn't some grand, inherited title. It's actually just a simple, descriptive name, medieval style. Rodrigo Díaz, which just means son of Diego de Vivar from Vivar. It's the equivalent of Rob Johnson's kid from Springfield. It's a name that says he's not from the upper echelons of power, he's from the working class of the warrior aristocracy. Because of his father's reputation, a great opportunity arises. Rodrigo is sent away from home, not as a punishment, but as a promotion. You follow him to the court of King Ferdinand the Great, the powerful ruler of Leon and Castile. He's to be a ward of the court, raised alongside the king's own children. This was a common practice. It was a way for the king to foster loyalty and, let's be blunt, to keep a well-treated hostage from a powerful family. Rodrigo is now in the big leagues. He swaps his rough, homespun tunic for the finer clothes of a courtier and enters a world of whispered gossip and political maneuvering. His best friend, the one he trains with and swears loyalty to, is the king's eldest son, Sancho. Sancho is bold, ambitious, and every inch the warrior prince. He sees in Rodrigo a kindred spirit, a young man of immense talent and fierce devotion. The two become inseparable. But there are other royal siblings. There's Alfonso, the second son, who is more cunning and political than his older brother. And there's a daughter, Babieca, who is intelligent, ambitious, and a master of the court's intricate games. You can already feel the tension brewing between these siblings. A classic case of a powerful father and the children who will one day fight over his legacy. And here's where the lines between history and legend begin to blur. A debate that keeps historians happily employed. The epic poems, written long after his death, paint a very clear picture. Rodrigo and Sancho are the heroic duo, while Alfonso is the jealous, scheming villain from day one. But was it really that simple? The historical reality was likely far more nuanced. These were young men growing up in a competitive, high-stakes environment. Friendships were real, but so were rivalries and ambitions. The clear-cut good guys and bad guys of the epic are probably a romantic simplification. The real Rodrigo was likely just a fiercely ambitious young man who knew his future was tied to hitting his wagon to the right royal horse. And for now, that horse was Prince Sancho. You watch Rodrigo in the training yard. He is no longer a boy. He's a young man, and he stands out. He is not just strong, he's smart. He sees angles other squires miss. He anticipates his opponent's moves. He has a natural, almost unnerving talent for combat. King Ferdinand himself takes notice. The other nobles see it, too, some with respect, others with a flicker of jealousy. This kid from a nowhere village is making a name for himself. He is earning his keep not through his lineage, but through sheer, undeniable skill. His time as a student is coming to an end. Soon, King Ferdinand will need more than a talented squire. He'll need a champion. And Rodrigo, hungry for glory and honor, is ready to answer the call. The air is thick with anticipation. You're standing in a wide, flat field that marks the disputed border between the kingdoms of Castile and Navarre. On one side, the banners of King Ferdinand of Castile ripple in the breeze, a sea of determined, anxious faces. On the other, the army of Navarre stands in silent opposition. The two kings have a territorial dispute, but instead of launching into a full-scale, bloody battle that would cost hundreds of lives, they've agreed to a more civilized solution. A trial by combat. Each side will choose one champion. The winner's king takes the territory. Simple, brutal, and incredibly high stakes. King Ferdinand scans the faces of his best knights. These are seasoned veterans, men with scars and reputations, but his eyes land on the young and proven Rodrigo. It's a huge gamble, entrusting the fate of a strategic castle to a man who, until now, has only fought in two recent skirmishes. Prince Sancho, however, is beaming. He claps Rodrigo on the shoulder, his faith in his friend absolute. You can feel the mix of terror and exhilarating pride surging through Rodrigo. This is it. This is the moment that will either make his career or end it before it truly begins. You watch as he dons his armor, not the ornate, polished plate armor you see in fantasy movies. This is the 11th century. His protection is a long coat of mail, thousands of tiny, interlinked iron rings worn over a padded tunic called a gambeson. It's heavy, hooked, and offers good protection against a slashing sword. But a well-aimed spear point could still find its way through. On his head, he wears a conical helmet with a nasal guard, a single strip of metal that protects his nose. His face is mostly exposed, which feels alarmingly vulnerable. His opponent from Navarre rides out to meet him, a man named Ximena Garces. He is a giant, a famous warrior known for his brute strength. He looks at Rodrigo with contempt. This boy, this is Castile's champion, the crowd murmurs. The odds, visually at least, are not in Rodrigo's favor. The two champions salute their kings and charge. The ground trembles under the weight of the war horses. There's a deafening crash of lance against shield. Both lances shatter, a spray of splintered wood exploding into the air. Now, it's down to swords and shields. They dismount and the real work begins. The Navarre giant swings his sword with massive, powerful arcs, trying to overwhelm Rodrigo with brute force. You hear the clang of his blade hammering against Rodrigo's shield, each blow strong enough to stagger him. But Rodrigo is lighter on his feet. He is not trying to match strength for strength. He dodges, he parries, using his opponent's momentum against him. It's a dance of death, a brutal choreography of footwork and blade work. He is looking for an opening, a moment of weakness, and then he finds it. After a particularly powerful swing, the giant is slightly off balance, his shield arm a fraction too low. In a flash, Rodrigo strikes, not a wild swing, but a precise, calculated thrust. His sword finds the gap in his opponent's armor. It's over in an instant. A stunned silence falls over the field, followed by an eruption of cheers from the Castellan side. Rodrigo, breathing heavily, stands over his fallen foe, He has done it. He has won the castle for his king. And here we get one of those wonderful, slightly bizarre tidbits of the era. To prove his victory, Rodrigo performs a grim but customary act. He mutilates the face of his defeated opponent. This wasn't seen as wantonly cruel, it was a common, if gruesome, practice in judicial duels. It was called deshonorar lvnc, I do, or dishonoring the vanquished. And it served as undeniable proof of victory, preventing any claims that the loser had simply yielded or that the fight was to the death. It's a stark reminder that their concept of honor was tied to very different and more brutal customs than our own. As Rodrigo rides back to the Castilian lines, King Ferdinand is overjoyed. Prince Sancho is ecstatic. From this day forward, Rodrigo is no longer just Rodrigo from Viva. He is given a new title, Campeador. It's a Latin-derived word that means champion or the battler. It's a title he earned with his own sword, Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, El Campeador. The name now has a ring to it. But even in this moment of triumph, you can see the seeds of future trouble. As Rodrigo receives the accolade, you notice the other royal sibling, Prince Alfonso, watching from the sidelines. His expression is hard to read. Is it admiration or is it something else, a flicker of resentment? Perhaps that this upstart knight is becoming so powerful, so quickly, and so clearly aligned with his brother and rival, Sancho. The historians still debate how Alfonso's true feelings at this stage, whether the enmity was already there or if it grew later. But standing on that field of victory, you can't help but feel a chill. This victory has made Rodrigo a hero, but it has also made him a target in a far more dangerous game than a one-on-one duel. The Game of Thrones. The high of victory on the battlefield quickly gives way to the low, simmering anxiety of the royal court. You trade the open, sun-baked field for the cool, shadowy stone halls of King Ferd in Andes Palace in Leon. The air here isn't thick with dust, but with whispers. Alliances are made and broken in hushed conversations and alcoves. Reputations are ruined by a well-placed rumor. This is a battle of a different kind, and Rodrigo, the straightforward Campeador, is not nearly as comfortable here. You watch him navigate this new terrain. He's a celebrity now, the hero of the duel, the king's champion. Knights slap him on the back. Courtiers offer him wine with smiles that don't quite reach their eyes. But H.E.S. on Coesman, through and through, his loyalty is fierce and public, which in a court full of factions is like painting a target on your back. The central problem, the one everyone is whispering about, is the king's succession plan. Ferdinand the Great, despite his grand title, is about to make a classic, terrible mistake. Instead of leaving his unified kingdom of Leon and Castile to his eldest son, Sancho, as was the custom, he decides to divide it. It's a well-intentioned disaster. H.E.S. trying to be fair to all his children, but H.E.S. actually setting them up for a civil war. To Sancho, the eldest, he gives Castile, his father's original kingdom. To Alfonso, the second son and his personal favorite, he gives the wealthier and more prestigious kingdom of Leon. To the youngest son, he gives the remote and fractious kingdom of Galicia. And to his daughters, Oricia and Elvira, he gives control of several important cities. It's a recipe for chaos. None of the siblings are satisfied. Sancho feels cheated out of the main prize. Alfonso feels he deserves it all. Under Oricia, a formidable political player in her own right, is now a powerful kingmaker, or queenmaker, with her own agenda. When the old king finally dies, his plan immediately begins to unravel. The fragile peace shatters. The three brothers, who grew up together, now look at each other across newly drawn borders, their suspicion growing into open hostility. Rodrigo is caught right in the middle of it. His lord, now King Sancho II of Castile, is determined to reunite his father's kingdom under his own rule, by force if necessary, and his primary weapon, his most trusted general, is Rodrigo Díaz. The Campier deal. This is where you get a peek into the less glamorous side of medieval command. Rodrigo is appointed the Armega Regis, or the Royal Standard Bearer. It sounds ceremonial, but it's a vital military command. You see him not just fighting, but planning. Poring over crude maps, gathering intelligence from scouts, and trying to figure out how to feed and pay an army. One of the weirder challenges he would have faced was logistics. Armies didn't have neat supply chains. They mostly lived off the land, which is a polite way of saying they took what they needed from the peasants they passed. A key part of being a good general wasn't just winning battles, but making sure your army didn't starve a desert before you even got there. Rodrigo leads Sancho's armies in a series of brilliant campaigns. First, they march against their cousins in the neighboring Christian kingdoms of Aragon and Navarre. Then, they turn their attention inward, to the real prize. Sancho and Rodrigo invade Leon, the kingdom of his brother Alfonso. In a decisive battle, they defeat him. Alfonso is captured and forced into exile, seeking refuge, ironically, in the sophisticated court of the Muslim chief of Toledo. Sancho now holds both Castile and Leon. He is one step away from his goal. Only his younger brother Garcia in Galicia, and his sister Erica in the city of Zamora, stand in his way. But this victory has come at a cost. The court is more divided than ever. The Leonese nobles resent their new Castellan king, and many whisper that Rodrigo's ambition is growing too large, that he holds too much power and influence over the king. Historians are still divided on the exact nature of Rodrigo's political savvy. Was he a simple, loyal soldier, blind to the courtly intrigue swirling around him, or was he a shrewd operator who understood the game, but chose to place all his bets on Sancho, believing his loyalty would be his ultimate protection either way? His fate is now irrevocably tied to his king, and his king, in his quest for total power, is about to besiege the last holdout, the walled city of Zamora, ruled by his very determined sister, Erica. It's a siege that will change Rodrigo's life forever. The dust of the campaign trail has barely settled, and now you find yourself outside the thick stone walls of Zamora. The city sits defiantly on a rocky bluff overlooking the Douro River. It's a tough nut to crack. And inside is someone even tougher than Erica, King Sancho's sister. She has refused to cede the city to him. And Sancho, never one to back down from a challenge, has laid siege to it. You're here with Rodrigo, standing in the command tent. The mood is grim. Sieges are miserable affairs. They are not glorious charges, but long, tedious, and deadly waiting games. Disease spreads through the camp faster than any rumor. Morale plummets as the days turn into weeks, then months. You watch Rodrigo directing the construction of siege engines, crude catapults, and siege towers, but the walls of Zamora are strong. The defenders, loyal to Erica, are resolute. King Sancho is growing impatient. He paces. He fumes. He wants the city taken. No, Rodrigo advises caution. But the king's frustration is boiling over, and it's this frustration that leads to his doom. One evening, a man claiming to be a deserter from Zamora is brought to the king. He calls himself VL Lido Adolfo. He tells Sancho he knows of a secret, poorly guarded gate into the city. He will lead the king to it personally. It's a trap. It smells like a trap. Rodrigo and the other senior nobles are deeply suspicious. But Sancho, blinded by his desire to end the siege, agrees to go with him, taking only a small group of guards. You watch them ride off, a sense of dread hanging in the air. A short while later, a single rider comes galloping back to the camp, his face pale with panic. The king is dead. VL Lido Adolfo, the deserter, had led Sancho away from his guards, and then, using a small javelin he had hidden, struck the king in the back and fled back to the safety of the city walls. Chaos erupts. The siege camp is thrown into turmoil. The king is dead, and there is no clear air with the army. The Castellan army, leaderless and demoralized, begins to fall apart. The siege of Zamora is over, a catastrophic failure. Now who benefits most from Sancho's death? His exiled brother, Alfonso, with Sancho dead, and their younger brother Garcia soon to be sidelined. The throne of the unified kingdom of Leon and Castile is now his. Alfonso returns from his exile in Toledo, ready to claim his inheritance. But there's a problem. A very big, very public suspicion. The nobles of Castile, led by a grieving and furious Rodrigo, suspect that Alfonso and his sister Araca conspired to assassinate Sancho. The assassin, after all, came from Araca's city, and the one who gained everything was Alfonso. This leads to one of the most famous, and possibly legendary, scenes in Spanish history. In the church of Santa Gadia in Burgos, Alfonso prepares for his coronation, but before the Castilian nobles will swear fealty to him, Rodrigo steps forward, in front of the entire court. He forces Alfonso to place his hand on the Bible and swear a public oath that he had no part in his brother's death. Not once, but 3 times. Imagine the tension in that church. The new king, being publicly humiliated and challenged by his most famous knight, Alfonso. His face a mask of cold fury, takes the oath. But he will never forgive Rodrigo for this. Never. Historians still debate whether this dramatic public oath swearing actually happened exactly as the epics describe it, or if it was a later invention to justify the deep animosity that followed. Did Rodrigo really have the nerve to so brazenly challenge a king to his face? Some think it's an exaggeration. But whether it happened in one dramatic confrontation or a series of political snubs, the result was the same. Rodrigo had made a powerful, permanent enemy. You are now a man without a master. Your protector, your friend, is dead. The new king despises you. You try to serve him faithfully. You go back to fighting his battles, leading his troops. But the atmosphere at court is poisoned. Your every success is viewed with suspicion. Your every victory is seen as a threat to the king's own glory. The courtiers who were jealous of you before now have the king's ear, and they whisper against you constantly. The final straw comes from a seemingly minor incident. Rodrigo, on his own initiative, leads an unauthorized raid into the territory of the Muslim Tife of Toledo, which was a tributary state of King Alfonso. Meaning, Toledo paid Alfonso protection money. By attacking them, Rodrigo had basically stolen from his own king. For Alfonso, this was the perfect excuse. It was the public act of insubordination he had been waiting for. He summons Rodrigo to court, not to praise him, but to punish him. In a cold, formal decree, King Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile declares Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, al campeador, an exile. He is stripped of his lands, his titles, and his honors. He is given just 9 days to leave the kingdom. He can take with him any who wish to follow, but they too will be outlaws. The king's champion, the hero of Castile, is now a man with nothing. You stand with him as the royal decree is read, the words echoing in the silent hall. You are homeless, disgraced, and on the road to nowhere. The gates of Burgos slam shut behind you. The 9 days are up. You are officially an outlaw, a man without a kingdom. The feeling is a hollow ache in your chest. Everything you've worked for, your home, your status, the favor of the king is gone. You're standing on a dusty road with a small band of loyal followers, knights who have chosen to share your disgrace rather than serve a king they don't trust. Your family, your wife and young daughters, have been left behind, seeking sanctuary in a monastery. It's a bitter, lonely moment. You turn your back on Castile and head east, towards the lands of the Moors. You are no longer Rodrigo Díaz, the Castilian champion. You are a mercenary, a sword for hire. You need to find a new lord, a new patron who can pay your men and offer you a new purpose. This is the ultimate test of your reputation. Is your name, El Campeador, valuable enough on its own, without a king's banner behind it? You and your small war been dragged to Barcelona, to the court of the Count bearing a Ramon II. You offer him your services, but the Count is proud and haughty. He looks at you, a disgraced exile, with disdain. The negotiations go badly. There's a sense that he sees you not as a great commander, but as a stray dog looking for scraps. The deal falls through. It's a humiliating rejection. So you travel further south, deeper into the fractured world of the Tifazé. You arrive at the gates of Zaragoza, one of the most powerful of the northern Muslim city-states. It's ruled by the emir, Yusuf al-Mu'taman ibn Hud. Unlike the Count of Barcelona, al-Mu'taman is a pragmatist. He is also a renowned scholar, a mathematician and an astronomer. He is less concerned with your religion or your past disgrace and more interested in your very well-known military skill. His kingdom is under constant threat from his Christian neighbors like the King of Aragon and his Muslim rivals. He needs a top-tier general. And the best one in Spain just showed up on his doorstep. He welcomes you with open arms. You are given a high command, a generous salary, and respect. You are now fighting for a Muslim ruler, against his enemies, who are often Christians. For the next several years, you become the chief protector of the Tifazé of Zaragoza. You lead al-Mu'taman's armies into battle against the King of Aragon and the Count of Barcelona, the same count who snubbed you earlier. And in a delicious moment of irony, you not only defeat the Count's army, you take him prisoner. It is during this time, leading a Muslim army, that you acquire the name that will echo through history. The soldiers of Zaragoza, your own men, look at you with awe. They don't call you Campeador, they use the Arabic honorific. It means my lord. The Christians hearing this name transliterate it into Spanish. City becomes El Cid, the Lord. Think about that for a moment. Spain's greatest Christian national hero gets his most famous name from the Muslim soldiers he was leading. It's a beautiful, complicated irony that perfectly captures the messy reality of the 11th century. This wasn't a simple holy war. It was a time when loyalty, skill, and mutual respect could, and did, cross religious lines. Your reputation is no longer just Castilian. It's pan-Iberian. You are El Cid Campeador, a name that resonates in both the Christian north and the Muslim south. And here's a quirky little detail from this period. While serving the emir of Zaragoza, El Cid would have been exposed to a level of science and culture far beyond what he knew in Castile. Zaragoza was a major intellectual center, while we have no evidence that El Cid himself became a scholar. It's fascinating to imagine this gruff warrior walking through courts where people were debating Greek philosophy, advancing algebra, and perfecting the astrolabe. It's a side of his life the epic poems tend to gloss over, the hero of Christendom spending his prime years as the loyal and highly paid general for a Muslim emir. The historical debate here is, of course, about his motivations. Were his years in Zaragoza a cynical, pragmatic career move, simply selling his sword to the highest bidder, or did he develop a genuine loyalty to the Hud dynasty that ruled the city? The epic El Cantar de Cid portrays this period as a time when a loyal vassal is patiently waiting to be recalled by his true king. But the reality seems to be that he thrived. He was respected, wealthy, and militarily independent in a way he never could have been under Alfonso. He was building his own power base, his own legend, on his own terms. He was no longer just the king's champion. He was El Cid, a power unto himself, and his old king. Alfonso, back in Leon, was watching all of this with a mixture of fury and, perhaps, a dawning realization that he had made a very big mistake in letting him go. Every legendary knight meets a legendary steed, and it's during this time of exile and rising fame that you meet your most famous companion. Not a person, but a horse. His name is Babieca, and like everything else in your life, the story of how you acquired him is a blend of history, legend, and a little bit of comedy. Let's get the legend out of the way first, because it's a great story. The tale, likely invented long after your death, goes that your godfather, or priest, told you to go to a monastery and pick any colt you wanted as a gift. You walked through the fields looking at all the strong, noble-looking young horses, but then you pointed to a scrawny, ugly, and somewhat clumsy-looking colt. Your godfather, exasperated, threw up his hands and exclaimed, which essentially means dolt or stupid. You, however, saw potential in the awkward young horse. You took him, named him Babieca in honor of your godfather's outburst, and trained him into the greatest warhorse in all of Spain. It's a classic ugly duckling story, emphasizing your unique ability to see value where others see none. Now, let's look at the more probable, though less romantic, historical version. A powerful warhorse, a destroyer, was the medieval equivalent of a main battle tank. They were not your average riding pony. They were massive, powerful animals, specially bred and trained for the shock and chaos of a cavalry charge. They were incredibly expensive, a status symbol as much as a weapon of war. A knight's life depended on the strength and courage of his mount. It's highly unlikely that a seasoned warrior like you would choose a weak or foolish animal. The name Babieca might not have even meant stupid in the dialect of the time. Its true origin and meaning are, like so many things about you, still debated by scholars. The most likely scenario is that you acquired Babieca after a battle. A common prize of victory was the armor and horse of a defeated knight. You probably won him from a noble Yuan horse, recognized his superior strength and training, and made him your primary mount. But let's put the origins aside and just appreciate this animal. Picture him. He's not asleep. Graceful racehorse. He's built for power. Broad chest. Thick legs. A powerful neck. He's trained to not just carry the immense weight of an armored knight, but to be an active participant in combat. He can tip, bite, and charge into a line of screaming men with shields and spears without panicking. You and Babieca become an iconic duo. When people see the powerful white stallion thundering across a battlefield, they know El Cid is there. The horse becomes an extension of your own fearsome reputation. And here's a funny little detail about medieval war horses: they were notoriously difficult to handle. They were bred for aggression and were often non-rideable by anyone other than their master. Think of them less as gentle pets and more as highly strung, professional athletes with a bad temper. There are accounts of destroyers being so valuable that they were led to the battlefield by a squire and the knight would only mount up right before the charge, to conserve the horse's energy and to avoid being thrown off by the ill-tempered beast on the way there. You spend countless hours with this animal. You trust him with your life, and he trusts you. In the chaos of battle, with swords swinging and men shouting, the bond between a knight and his horse is one of the few constants. Babieca carries you through your victories for the Emir of Zaragoza. He carries you when you eventually reconcile. Briefly, with King Alfonso, he is your constant companion, a silent witness to your changing fortunes. The legend of Babieca grows alongside your own. It's said that after your death, no one ever rode him again, and he was cared for until he died of old age, and then buried with honors near your own grave. Whether that's true or not is impossible to say, but it speaks to how intertwined your identities became. You were El Cid, and he was Babieca, the powerful steed that carried the legend. This horse isn't just a bit player in your story. He is a key character, a living symbol of your power. And he has a crucial, a rather strange, role yet to play. He is destined not just to carry you in life, but to carry you one last time, in death, into your greatest and most surreal victory. The years in Zaragoza have been good to you. You are wealthy, respected, and your small band of exiled knights has grown into a formidable private army. You are, for all intents and purposes, the CEO of a highly successful freelance military corporation. Your brand El Cid is synonymous with victory. If a ruler has a military problem and enough gold, he can hire you to solve it. This is a strange and unique position to be in. You are no longer bound by the fealty you owe a king. Your loyalty is to your men and to the contract you sign. This gives you a level of freedom and autonomy that is almost unheard of for a single knight. You call the shots. You decide the strategy. You reap the rewards. Your business operates on a simple, effective model. You and your core group of veteran knights, your management team, provide the expertise. You recruit additional soldiers, both Christian and Muslim, on a short-term basis for specific campaigns. You've become an expert in logistics, a skill you've been honing since you were Soncho's standard bearer. You know how to move an army, how to pay them, and most importantly, how to feed them. A hungry army is a rebellious army, and you run a tight ship. Your main source of income comes from a few different streams. First, the salary from your patron, the emir of Zaragoza. Second, the perios. This was a common system in Iberia at the time. A perio was essentially protection money. A weaker kingdom or city would pay a stronger one not to attack them. You become an expert at extracting these tributes. You show up at the gates of a town with your army, look menacing, and the local ruler suddenly finds it wise to make a generous gift to you and your men. It's a polite form of extortion, and it's fantastically profitable. The third and most significant income stream is, of course, battlefield plunder. After a victory, the spoils of the enemy camp, their weapons, armor, gold, horses, and supplies were divided up amongst the victors. As the commander, you receive the largest share. Fifth, after a few major victories, you have become an incredibly wealthy man, far richer than you ever were as a landed noble in Castile. Now, for a little-known fact about these mercenary companies, their legal status was often incredibly murky. While you were officially exiled from Castile, your very existence was, in a weird way, sometimes useful to King Alfonso. You were a powerful, independent Christian army operating in the Muslim south. Even when you weren't officially working for him, your actions often destabilized his enemies. It was a strange, deniable asset situation. Some historians argue that powerful freelancers like you were a crucial, if unofficial, part of the Reconquesta's machinery, constantly chipping away at the strength of the Tife kingdoms. However, the ethics of your new profession are, let's say, flexible. Your contracts dictate your targets. 1 month, you might be defending the Muslim city of Zaragoza from the Christian king of Aragon. The next, you could be attacking a different Muslim Tife on behalf of Zaragoza. Your enemies and allies are not defined by their faith, but by the strategic and financial needs of your employer. This is something the later epic poems, which frame you as a pure crusading hero, conveniently gloss over. The real El Cid of this period was a pragmatist, a professional soldier who fought for those who paid him, regardless of whether they prayed in a church or a mosque. This has led to a long-standing debate among historians: was El Cid a traitor to his faith? A man whose only real loyalty was to gold, or was he a product of his time? A man who operated within the complex, cross-cultural system of alliances that defined 11th century Spain? The answer is likely neither and both. He was an exile, trying to survive and provide for his men in the only way he knew how. He maintained his personal Christian faith, but his professional life was a masterclass in religious neutrality. He built his reputation on reliability and results, not on ideology. You're at the peak of your power as a mercenary commander. Your name is feared and respected across the peninsula. King Alfonso, hearing of your ever-growing wealth and influence, is forced to reassess. He's facing a new, major threat from North Africa, a new dynasty of zealous warriors who are not interested in the old system of paying tribute. He needs his best general back. The king swallows his pride and sends a message. The exile is over. You are invited to return to Castile, but you're not the same man who left. You're no longer a disgraced vassal begging for forgiveness. You are El Cid, a kingmaker, a man who has built a kingdom of his own, one made of steel, gold, and reputation. And when you return, it will be on your own terms. Your temporary reconciliation with King Alfonso is a fragile one, a marriage of convenience. He needs your military genius. And you, perhaps, miss the legitimacy of serving a Christian king. Or maybe you just want to see your family again. Whatever the reason, you are back in the service of Castile. But the dynamic has completely changed. You are not his humble vassal, you are his massively successful, semi-independent general. The king is facing a new and terrifying enemy. The old, fractured system of the Tife kingdoms is being upended. A new power has arrived from North Africa, the Almoravids. These are not like the refined, poetry-loving emirs of Al-Andalus. They are deeply conservative, zealous Berber warriors, and they see the Spanish Tife kings as decadent and corrupt. They've crossed the Strait of Gibraltar with a mission to purify Islam in Spain and push the Christians back into the sea. They are not interested in Perry-as or polite alliances. They are here for holy war. King Alfonso suffers a devastating defeat at their hands at the Battle of Sagracious. His army is crushed. Suddenly, the squabbles between Christian and Muslim Tife kings seem like petty schoolyard fights. This is an existential threat. And Alfonso knows there's only one man in Iberia who has consistently proven he can win against overwhelming odds. So you begin to fight for Alfonso again. But the old trust is gone. The courtiers are still whispering. The king's jealousy still simmers just beneath the surface. You lead campaigns. You win battles. But the relationship is strained. And it finally breaks. Again. Over a misunderstanding and a breach of protocol. While you are in the south raising an army, a part of the king's own force is surrounded and defeated. Your enemies at court immediately spin the story Al Cid deliberately failed to come to the king's aid. He abandoned him in his hour of need. It's almost certainly not true. You were likely following your orders, unaware of the king's dire situation. But for Alfonso, it's the last straw. The old wound of the oath in Burgos. The years of your successful exile. The humiliation of needing you, it all boils over. He exiles you for a second time. And this time, something in you snaps. You are done trying to please this king. You are done with courtly politics. You served a Muslim lord with more loyalty and received more respect than you have from your own Christian king. The second exile is not a moment of disgrace, it's a liberation. You are now really, completely, your own man. You will not seek a new master. You will become the master. You turn your formidable private army, a finely honed instrument of war, towards the east coast of Spain, the rich, sun-drenched lands of the Levante. This region is a patchwork of wealthy cities and fertile farmland, nominally under the control of various weak rulers. It's a power vacuum, and you are about to fill it. You are no longer a mercenary working for others. You are now a warlord, carving out a kingdom for yourself. And this is where your list of allies and enemies becomes a fascinatedly complex tapestry. You operate with absolute pragmatism. You make an alliance with the Muslim ruler of Zaragoza, your old boss, to attack the Muslim ruler of Lerida, who is allied with the Christian Count of Barcelona. Let that sink in. You and a Muslim emir are fighting another Muslim emir who is backed by a Christian count. It's a geopolitical tangle that would give a modern diplomat a headache. In one famous battle, you once again defeat and capture your old rival, the Count of Barcelona. Here's a small, telling detail about your methods. After capturing the very wealthy Count, you don't just ransom him back for gold. You hold a feast in his honor. You treat him with the courtesy due his rank. Then you present him with a bill for his freedom so enormous it practically bankrupts him. It's a classic Cid move, observing the chivalric niceties while being ruthlessly effective in business. Historians often struggle to label you during this period. Are you a crusader? Clearly not. You're fighting as many Christians as you are Muslims. Are you a proto-Spaniard? A visionary trying to unite the peninsula that's also a stretch. You are acting in your own self-interest. The most accurate, if least romantic, description is that you were a highly successful condottiero, an Italian term for a mercenary captain who becomes a political power in his own right. You were creating your own personal fiefdom, accountable to no one. Your ultimate goal comes into focus. A jewel of the Mediterranean coast, a city famous for its riches, its workshops, and its ports. A city that had, so far, managed to play all sides and maintain its independence. The city of Valencia. You set your sights on it. Taking Valencia would be the ultimate prize. It would make you a prince in all but name. No longer a sword for hire, but a lord of your own domain. The final, most ambitious chapter of your career is about to begin. Amidst the clash of swords and the dust of the campaign trail, there is another, quieter side to your story. It's a story not of war, but at home. And at the center of that story is your wife, Donna Ximena of Leon. If you are the protagonist of this epic, she is the steadfast protagonist. A figure of immense strength and dignity whose importance is often overshadowed by your military exploits. Let's meet her properly. Ximena, sometimes spelled Ximena, was not a peasant girl you fell in love with. She was a high-born noblewoman, a member of the Leonese aristocracy, possibly even related to King Alfonso himself. Your marriage, which took place during that brief period of reconciliation with the king, was almost certainly a political arrangement. It was a way for Alfonso to tie you, his dangerously powerful general, more closely to the throne of Leon. He likely hoped that giving you a high-status wife would placate your ambition and keep you in line. From a historical perspective, that's where the clear facts about Ximena end and the legend begins. We know she existed. We know she married you and bore your children. But her personality, her thoughts, her role in your decisions, these are things that history, written by men about the deeds of men, largely left unrecorded. The epic poems and later chronicles had to fill in the blanks, and they painted her as the perfect medieval noblewoman, loyal, pious, patient, and perpetually suffering with grace. But you can read between the lines and see a woman of incredible resilience. Imagine her life. She marries a famous but controversial warrior. Not long after, her husband is declared an outlaw and exiled. She is left behind, essentially a hostage, with 2 young daughters. Her lands are confiscated. She is forced to seek refuge in the monastery of San Pedro de Cardenas, living at the charity of the monks. For years, her only connection to you is through messages carried by trusted knights, and the ever-growing legend of your deeds in the south. She raises your children, Christina, and a son, Dago, largely on her own. She manages their education, maintains the family's honor in your absence, and waits. There's a quiet strength in that endurance that is just as profound as charging into battle. One of the interesting, undebated, aspects of your relationship is its emotional nature. Was this purely a political match, a loveless duty, or did a genuine affection and partnership develop between you? The epic poem, El Cantar de Mayo Cid, portrays a deeply loving relationship. There are tender scenes of farewell at the monastery gates, and a joyful reunion when you are finally successful enough to send for her. While this is likely romanticized, it's not impossible. You and Ximena were bound together by shared fortune, by your children, and by the precarious world you inhabited. A partnership built on mutual respect and reliance can often forge a bond stronger than one based on initial passion. Here's a small detail that hints at her character. In the medieval world, women, especially noble women, were often used as political pawns in marriage alliances. Your daughters were no exception. You would eventually marry them off to powerful princes to secure your own political position. This was standard practice, but it was Ximena who would have overseen their upbringing, preparing them for these high-stakes roles. She would have taught them the skills needed to navigate a royal court, to manage a great household, and to be a worthy partner to a prince. She was the keeper of the family's social and political future. Historians who focus on women's history have worked hard to piece together a more complete picture of Ximena. They look at charters she signed, at her actions after your death, and they see not a passive, weeping wife, but a capable and intelligent woman. She was a landowner, a manager, and, as we will see, a leader in her own right. She understood the world of power and politics just as well as you did, just from a different vantage point. When you finally conquer Valencia and carve out your own principality, you send for her and your children. You can imagine the scene: Ximena, leaving the cold stone monastery behind, traveling with a heavy guard through a dangerous country, to be reunited with you in a sun-drenched palace by the sea. It is the culmination of years of waiting. She arrives not as the wife of a disgraced exile, but as the first lady of a new and powerful state. She stands by your side as you rule. A partner in your triumph, she has weathered the worst of the storm. And now she is here to share in the reward. Her quiet, patient vigil is over. But her most difficult and defining test is yet to come. A warrior is only as good as his weapons, and in the legend of El Cid, your swords are nearly as famous as your horse. They aren't just pieces of steel, they are characters in your story, imbued with their own histories, personalities, and almost magical properties. Their names are Ximena and Colada. Let's start with what a top-tier sword in 11th century Spain was actually like. Forget the enormous, two-handed great swords from fantasy games. Your swords are single-handed, double-edged, and designed to be used with a shield. They are exquisitely balanced, a product of master craftsmanship. The steel itself is the key. The ability to create a blade that was hard enough to hold a sharp edge but flexible enough not to shatter on impact was a highly prized and secretive art. The best blades often came from forges in Toledo, which had a centuries-old reputation, or were imported from places like Damascus, famous for its pattern-welded steel that created beautiful, watery patterns on the blade. These weren't mass-produced items, they were the supercars of their day, rare, expensive, and a symbol of immense status. Now, let's look at your legendary blades. First, Colada. The epic poem tells us you won this sword from the Count of Barcelona, that same fellow you kept defeating and capturing. After one of your victories against him, you took his magnificent sword as part of the spoils of war. The name Colada likely refers to a Cerro Colado, meaning cast steel, or steel that has been purified and freed from impurities. It was a way of saying this was a blade of the highest quality. In the poem, the sword is described as being so fearsome that it terrifies unworthy opponents just by being drawn from its scabbard. Then there is Ximena, the more famous of the two. According to the legend, you captured Ximena from a fearsome Moorish king named Ucef in Valencia. The name Ximena likely comes from the Spanish word tizio, meaning a firebrand or a burning piece of wood. It evokes an image of a sword that burns like fire, a weapon of righteous fury. The legend claims it was forged in the year 1002 and possessed an inscription on its blade. It was your primary sword, the one most closely associated with your greatest victories. So how much of this is true? This is where historians and mythologists have a wonderful, ongoing argument. Did these exact swords, would these names, really exist and belong to you? The answer is maybe. It's certainly plausible that you owned two exceptional swords and that they were famous enough to be given names. Warriors had been naming their weapons for centuries. The part that is almost certainly legendary is their semi-magical ability to frighten cowards. That's the poets adding a bit of dramatic flair, turning great weapons into symbols of your own inner strength and virtue. A coward wasn't afraid of the steel itself, he was afraid of the man wielding it. Here's a fascinating, and slightly weird, tidbit for you. A sword claimed to be Ximena actually exists today. It is on display in the Museum of Burgos in Spain. It's a magnificent weapon, and for centuries it was revered as the actual sword of El Cid. However, modern scientific analysis has complicated things. Studies on the blade's composition and inscription suggest that while the blade itself is indeed from the 11th century or era, the hilt, crossguard, and pommel were later additions, from the 15th or 16th century. So is it the real Ximena? Is it a genuine 11th century blade that was later upgraded with a more fashionable hilt? Or is it a contemporary blade from your time that was later ascribed the legendary name to increase its value and prestige? The debate is fierce. The museum stands by its claim, but many historians remain skeptical. It's a perfect example of how a physical object can become a focal point for the hazy intersection of history and legend. In the epic, these swords are not just tools. They are part of your legacy. You don't just wield them, you bestow them. Later in the story, you give Colada and Ximena to your new sons-in-law, the Infantess of Carrion as wedding gifts. When they prove themselves to be cruel cowards, you demand the swords back, not just because they are valuable, but because the men are unworthy of them. The swords represent your honor, and you will not allow them to be held by dishonorable men. As you stand on the brink of your greatest campaign, the conquest of Valencia, you are home. You have your loyal men, your legendary horse Babieca, and in your hand, a sword tease owner or calator. It matters little which that feels like a living extension of your will. It is the tool with which you will carve out your own kingdom from the sun-beaten coast of Spain. Your gaze is fixed eastward, toward the sea. The target is locked Valencia. But this isn't the Valencia you might picture today, a bustling modern city. In the late 11th century, Valencia is one of the great prizes of the Iberian Peninsula. It's not just a city, it's the capital of its own rich, independent faith. Let your mind paint the picture. The city itself is protected by formidable walls, a legacy of Roman and Moorish engineering. Inside those walls lies a labyrinth of narrow, winding streets, bustling markets, and grand houses with hidden courtyards and fragrant gardens. The scent of orange and lemon groves, which surround the city for miles, hangs in the air. This is possible because of a sophisticated irrigation system, the hortus, a network of canals and ditches originally perfected by the Romans and vastly improved under Muslim rule. This system turns the surrounding plain into an incredibly fertile agricultural paradise. The city is famous for its workshops producing paper, ceramics, textiles, and intricate leather goods. Its port connects it to the trade routes of the Mediterranean, bringing in wealth from as far away as Byzantium and Egypt. Valencia is, in short, a jackpot, and it's politically vulnerable. The city is ruled by a weak emir who is struggling to maintain his authority. He pays tribute to King Alfonso to protect him from other predators. But he's also trying to appease the powerful Almoravids to the south. He is caught in a political vice. And you, El Cid, are about to become the third and most immediate source of pressure. Your dream of Valencia isn't just about wealth. It's about something more profound. By conquering Valencia, you would cease to be a wandering warlord. A sword for hire, you would become a sovereign prince, the ruler of your own state. You would have a home, a capital, a legacy to pass on to your children. It would be the ultimate vindication. The exile from Castile would no longer be a mark of shame, but the first step on your journey to becoming a king in all but name. This isn't just a military campaign, it's the culmination of your life's ambition. So you begin your campaign, but you don't just march straight to the city walls. That would be foolish. You are a master strategist, not a blunt instrument. You spend the better part of 2 years systematically conquering the territory around Valencia. You operate like a boa constrictor, slowly squeezing your prey. You capture the castles and fortified towns that control the roads and supply lines. You seize control of the rich farmlands that feed the city. You effectively cut Valencia off from the rest of the world. During this time, you establish a permanent base of operations at a place called El Pug, a fortified hill just a few miles north of Valencia. From here, you can see the city, a constant reminder of your goal. You use this base to launch raids, intercept supplies, and consolidate your control over the region. Here's a clever, and rather ruthless, aspect of your strategy. You turn the region's own wealth against it. You become the new master of the Parias system. The smaller towns and villages in the Valencian countryside now have to pay you protection money. If they pay, your armies leave their fields and people alone. If they don't, well, you make an example of them. It's brutal, but incredibly effective. You are financing your long-term siege of Valencia using Valencia's own resources. Historians are still somewhat in awe of this campaign. It was a masterclass in long-term strategic thinking. This wasn't a quick smash-and-grab raid. It was a slow, methodical, and intelligent conquest. Some have even compared your strategy to the oil spot tactics of modern counterinsurgency. where you establish a secure base and then slowly expand your zone of control outward. Did you have some grand, written down strategic doctrine? Almost certainly not. But you had an intuitive genius for warfare, an understanding of logistics, psychology, and terrain that was unrivaled. You are no longer fighting for a king or an emir. Every castle taken, every bag of gold collected, is for you and your men. Your followers are not just soldiers anymore, they are stakeholders in this grand enterprise. They know that if you succeed, they will be rewarded with lands and wealth beyond their wildest dreams. Their loyalty to you is absolute. They are the army of El Cid, and you are leading them to their promised land. Finally, after years of preparation, the time is right. You have isolated Valencia from any potential allies. You control its food supply. The city is ripe for the taking. You move your army from El Pug and establish a formal blockade. The great siege of Valencia is about to begin. The dream is within your grasp. But it will require one last, agonizing effort to make it a reality. The dream of Valencia gives way to the grueling reality of besieging it. You are now encamped outside the city walls, and a new kind of war begins. A war of patience, engineering, and psychological attrition. Forget the Hollywood image of constant, heroic assaults. A medieval siege was mostly a long, miserable, and profoundly boring affair, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. Your first task is to create a complete blockade. Your army establishes a series of fortified camps, or cluster, encircling the entire city. No one gets in, and no one gets out. The goal is simple and brutal: to starve the city into submission. You are waiting for the granaries inside Valencia to run empty, for desperation to gnaw at the defenders' resolve. Days turn into weeks, and weeks into months. The sun beats down on your camp. The conditions are squalid. Sanitation is a concept that doesn't exist, and the risk of dysentery or typhus sweeping through your army is as great a threat as any sortie from the city's defenders. You watch your men. You have to keep their morale up. You organize patrols, drills, and the construction of siege equipment to keep them busy. An idle army is a mutinous army. Inside the city, things are even worse. You can only imagine the slow-motion horror unfolding within those walls. First, the luxuries disappear. Then, the prices of basic foodstuffs, grain, oil, or skinny chicken skyrocket. People begin to eat their horses, their cats, their dogs. Eventually, they are reduced to boiling leather belts and shoe soles for a meager, foul-tasting broth. The beautiful city becomes a prison of hunger. From time to time, the defenders will attempt a sortie, flinging open a gate and launching a surprise attack on one of your camps, trying to break the encirclement. These are desperate, bloody affairs. You see them coming, and your cavalry, led by your trusted Lieutenant Alvafani Z, is always ready to ride them down, pushing them back inside their stone cage. You also employ the siege engines of the day. You order the construction of catapults and mangonels. But these are not the pinpoint accurate artillery of a later age. They are unwieldy wooden machines that hurl huge stones, not with the aim of knocking down the massive walls, but to harass the defenders. The constant, random thud of rocks crashing into rooftops frays nerves, collapses houses, and makes normal life within the city impossible. You might also build siege towers, enormous wooden structures on wheels that can be rolled up to the walls, allowing your soldiers to storm the battlements. But Valencia's defenses are strong, and these attacks are costly and rarely succeed. Here's a strange and little-known aspect of siege warfare from this era: the use of primitive biological and chemical warfare. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was nasty. Besiegers were known to use their catapults to fling rotting animal carcasses and other filth over the city walls. The goal was not just to create a horrible stench, but to spread disease and poison the defenders' water supplies. There are even accounts from other sieges of beehives or wasps' nests being launched, creating panic and chaos on the battlements. While we don't have a specific record of you doing this at Valencia, It was a standard part of the medieval siege playbook. The siege grinds on for nearly 20 months. The suffering on both sides is immense. The historical chronicles, both Christian and Arabic, describe the horrors of the famine inside the city in graphic detail. It's a grim reminder that war in this era wasn't just about knights and honor, it was about inflicting profound misery on civilian populations to achieve a military objective. This is the unglamorous, brutal truth behind your glorious conquest. The ethical debate among historians who restart. The epic poem presents the conquest of Valencia as a righteous act, the rightful reward for a wronged hero. But from the perspective of the city's inhabitants, you were a ruthless predator, starving thousands of innocent people for your own personal gain. Was your ambition justified by the standards of the time? Absolutely. Was it a humanitarian catastrophe also? Absolutely. This is the dark side of your legend, the part that doesn't make it into the heroic ballads. Finally, in the spring of 1094, the city can take no more. They are broken. An envoy, a white flag fluttering above him, emerges from the gates. The ruling Cadi, or judge, of the city, Ibn Jaya Trayf, officially surrenders Valencia to you. The gates are thrown open, not in defeat, but in desperate relief. Your men march into the city, not as conquerors fighting their way through, but as a new authority taking possession of a starved, broken, but still priceless jewel. You ride through the streets on Babieca, the stench of death and desperation still hanging in the air. You have done it. The dream is real, but it was born from a nightmare of hunger and suffering. You ride through the main gate of Valencia, and the feeling is one of surreal accomplishment. The nearly 2-year siege is over. The city is yours. You are no longer Rodrigo Díaz, the exile from Vivar. You are the sovereign ruler of one of the most prosperous city-states in Iberia. You are, effectively, Prince of Valencia. The first thing you do is establish order. The city is in a fragile state. Your soldiers are flush with victory, and the civilian population is starving and terrified. You know that a single spark of violence could lead to a massacre and destroy the very prize you worked so hard to win. You issue strict orders to your men. There will be no looting, no random acts of violence. Your takeover is to be a transfer of power, not a sack. You take up residence in the Alcazar, the city's fortress palace. You stand on a balcony overlooking the city you now command. You see the maze of streets, the domes of the mosques, the bustling port in the distance. This is your domain. You have absolute authority. You can mint your own coins, dispense your own justice, and wage your own wars. It's a heady feeling, a level of power you have never known before. You immediately begin to organize your new state. You are surprisingly good at it. You are not just a warrior, you prove to be a capable administrator. You understand that the city's wealth comes from its intricate social and economic fabric, and you are careful not to tear it. You allow the Muslim population to keep their property, their laws, and their religious freedom, provided they pay their taxes to you, their new lord. The great mosque is converted into a cathedral, a symbolic act of Christian conquest, but for the most part, you allow life to continue as it was. You know the hortis, the complex irrigation systems, are the lifeblood of the region, and you wisely leave the local experts in charge of managing them. You send for Ximena and your children. They arrive in a grand procession, and you install them in the palace. For the first time in years, your family is reunited, not in a cold monastery or a temporary camp, but in a home of their own, a palace befitting their new status. You are finally able to provide them with the security and prestige you have been fighting for your entire life. You are the patriarch of a new ruling dynasty. Here's a small, but significant detail of your new rule. You begin to style yourself Princeps Rodricus Campidoctor, which translates to Prince Rodrigo, the Champion. This title appears on official documents and charters that you sign. It's a clear declaration of your status. You are not a king. That title was reserved for monarchs of established royal bloodlines like your old nemesis, Alfonso. But prince was a title that conveyed sovereignty and independence. You were acknowledging no higher authority on earth. Of course, your rule isn't universally celebrated. The previous ruler of the city, the Cadi ibn Jiihf, who had surrendered to you, meets a grim fate. You accuse him of hiding the city's treasure, and under a combination of pressure and, likely, torture, he is condemned and executed. This act sends a clear, chilling message to the city's old elite: there is a new master, and his authority is absolute and ruthless when crossed. The academic debate surrounding your rule of Valencia is fascinating. Was this an early example of tolerant, pragmatic governance, where a Christian ruler successfully presided over a mixed Muslim and Christian population, respecting their customs out of practical wisdom, or was it simply a military occupation, where the veneer of tolerance was a thin cover for a regime built on extortion and fear? Some sources praise your justice and the stability you brought to a chaotic region. Arabic sources, on the other hand, often paint you as a cruel and avaricious tyrant. As with most things about you, the truth is likely a complex mixture of both. You were probably a fair ruler, by the standards of the 11th century, as long as your authority and your income were not challenged. Your old king, Alfonso, now has to deal with the reality that his former vassal is now his peer. He is the king of Leon and Castile, but you are the prince of Valencia. He can't command you anymore. He has to negotiate with you as an equal. You have completely rewritten the rules of your relationship. You spend the next few years consolidating your power, fending off attempts by the Almoravids to retake the city, and enjoying the fruits of your long struggle. You are at the absolute pinnacle of your life. You have a family, a home, a fortune, and a kingdom. You have achieved everything an ambitious, landless knight could ever dream of. The story should end here, with you living out your days in sun-drenched splendor. But the Almoravids have not forgotten you, and the final, greatest test of your legend is still to come. Life as the Prince of Valencia is good, but it's not simple. The epic poems and romantic legends tend to skip over the messy day-to-day governance, where you're living it. The same ambition and ruthlessness that allowed you to conquer Valencia are now required to rule it. And that creates a portrait of a ruler who is far from a spotless saint. This is the B-side of the glorious album of your life. Your primary concern is money. Always money. Running a state, even a small city-state, is fantastically expensive. You have to pay your garrison of soldiers, maintain the city's fortifications, and fund your own lavish court to project an image of power and stability. Your methods for raising this cash are effective, but not always gentle. The system of taxes you impose on the Muslim population is heavy, while you allow them to live in peace. It's a peace they pay for dearly. You also continue your old business of running a protection racket in the surrounding territories. You are the regional hegemon, and the small towns and castles in the Levante pay you tribute to avoid being attacked. Your men become expert tax collectors, and their methods are not always polite. Arabic chroniclers of the time, your enemies, paint a picture of a greedy tyrant, a man whose thirst for gold was insatiable. They write of confiscations of property, of heavy fines for minor infractions, and of a general atmosphere of financial pressure. Then there's the issue of justice. You are the ultimate judge in Valencia. The epic talks of your wisdom and fairness, and for your Christian followers on the lies. This was likely true. You were known to be generous to your loyal knights, rewarding them with lands and riches. But your justice could also be swift and brutal. We already saw what happened to the former Cadi, Ibn Jiihf. This was not an isolated incident. Anyone suspected of plotting against you, of conspiring with the Almoravids, or of holding back taxes, could expect a harsh verdict. The methods of interrogation used were, by modern standards, horrific, though they were standard practice for the age. This wasn't a realm of due process, it was a dictatorship, albeit a potentially benevolent one, if you stayed on the right side of the dictator. Let's talk about your son, Diego Rodriguez. He is the heir to your principality, the future of the dynasty you're trying to build. You groom him for leadership, training him in the arts of war just as you were at reign. He fights alongside you in your campaigns, but his story ends in tragedy. While fighting for King Alfonso during another brief alliance of convenience against the Almoravids at the Battle of Consuegra, Diego is killed. His death is a devastating personal blow. It also shatters your dream of a direct male line to inherit your kingdom. Your legacy now rests on your daughters and the powerful husbands you can find for them. This brings us to a particularly infamous and controversial part of your story. One that the epic poem spends a great deal of time on: the marriage of your daughters, Cristina and Maria, to the Infantess of Carrion. These were two high-ranking nobles from Castile, and on the surface, it was a brilliant political match. By marrying your daughters into the high Castellan nobility, you were legitimizing your own family, linking your new bloodline with the old aristocracy. King Alfonso himself helped broker the match. Here's a little-known tidbit that modern historians, particularly those with a cynical view, point out. The Infantess of Carrion were, in reality, powerful and important figures. However, in the Cantar Cid, they are portrayed as greedy, cowardly, and villainous fools from the very beginning. They are depicted as being terrified of a lion that gets loose in your court, and they prove to be useless in battle. The poem says they marry your daughters only for your dowry, and then, feeling humiliated by their own cowardice, they take the girls into a forest, beat them savagely, and leave them for dead. Now, historians are deeply divided on this. Did this brutal assault actually happen as described, or is it a dramatic invention by the poet to serve a narrative purpose? The pro-epic camp argues that something terrible must have happened to dissolve the marriages and that the story reflects a real event. The skeptical camp argues that the story is probably a fabrication. They suggest the marriages may have ended for more mundane political reasons, and the poet invented the horrificous old story to completely villainize the Infantess. By extension, your old enemies in the Castellan court. They become cartoonish bad guys so you can be an even more righteous hero when you bring them to justice. Regardless of the literal truth, the story illustrates a key point. You are a new money prince. The old, established nobility of Castile looks down on you, even as they envy your wealth and power. You are an upstart, and there is a deep cultural and political resentment towards you. You may be the Prince of Valencia, but to some, you'll always be just Rodrigo, the Infant's own son from Babieca. The challenges of ruling are not just external, from the Almoravids at your gates, but also internal, from the complex social politics of the world you are trying to dominate. In the middle of all this state building, political maneuvering, and constant threat of war, you carve out moments of peace. These are the quiet interludes, the domestic scenes that rarely make it into the grand military histories, but are essential to understanding you as a person. With your wife Ximena and your daughters by your side in the palace at Valencia, you experience a period of domestic tranquility you haven't known since you were a young man in Castile. Picture the scene. You are walking with Ximena through the palace gardens. The air is warm and scented with jasmine and citrus. The sound of a fountain splashing in a tiled courtyard replaces the clang of swords in the training yard. For a brief time, you are not El Cid, the fearsome warlord, but Rodrigo, the husband and father. You watch your daughters, now young women, learning the skills of noble ladies, perhaps embroidery, music, or how to manage a great household, all under Ximena's watchful eye. These are precious, fleeting moments of normalcy in an extraordinary life. This is the period when you secure the future of your lineage through your daughters' marriages. After the disastrous, or at least politically failed marriage to the Infantess of Carrion is annulled, you arrange new, even more prestigious matches. Your daughter Cristina is married to Ramiro Sanchez, a Prince of Navarre. Your other daughter is married to Ramon Barriga III, the Count of Barcelona, the son of the same count you had repeatedly defeated and humiliated. How's that for an ironic twist of fate? Your former rival's family is now your own. These marriages are your ultimate political triumph. They are a public declaration that your family, the Díaz de Vivar clan, is now part of the royal fabric of Spain. Your grandchildren will be princes and rulers. The blood of the upstart knight from Vivar will flow in the veins of future kings. Your legacy is secure. It's a stunning achievement, a social climb of epic proportions. Here's a small detail that gives us a glimpse into your life inside the palace. As the ruler of a former two-fake kingdom, you would have inherited a household staff and a style of living that was far more luxurious and sophisticated than what you were used to in the rugged, austere courts of Castile. You would have had access to things like public baths, a Roman and Moorish tradition that many Christians viewed with suspicion, carpets, silk tapestries, and a cuisine infused with new spices like saffron and cinnamon. It's a strange thought Spain's great Christian hero likely spent his final, most prosperous years living in a palace built by Muslim emirs, enjoying the comforts of Islamic material culture. But this peace is always fragile, always lived in the shadow of war. The Almoravids have not given up on retaking Valencia. Their threat is a constant, low hum in the background of your life. Every decision you make is colored by this reality. When you look out from your palace walls, you are not just admiring the view, you are scanning the horizon for the dust cloud of an approaching army. The historical debate here centers on your state of mind in these final years. Were you content? Did you see Valencia as the final destination, a place to live out your days in peace, or did the warrior in you remain restless? Some portrayals suggest you were weary of fighting, a man who had seen enough bloodshed and simply wanted to protect what he had won. Others argue that you never stopped being the campeador, that you were always planning your next move, always thinking about how to expand your power and counter the Almoravid threat. The truth is probably that you were both, a man who cherished the peace he had found for his family, but who knew, with the certainty of a lifelong soldier, that peace is never a gift. It is a prize that must be defended, constantly. You enjoy these years. You watch your family flourish. You rule your city. You are the master of your own destiny. You host feasts. You dispense justice. You receive emissaries from other rulers. You are the living embodiment of a success story. But the hum of the Almoravid war drums is getting louder. A massive army is assembling in the south, under the command of one of their most formidable generals, Yusuf ibn Tishufn. Their goal is singular: to destroy the Christian principality of Valencia and kill the man who created it. The final, great battle of your life is approaching. The quiet, sun-drenched days are numbered. The fragile peace shatters. Word arrives from your network of scouts and spies, and the news is grim. A massive Almoravid army is on the march from the south. This is not a mere raiding party, this is a full-scale invasion force, dispatched with the express purpose of erasing your principality from the map. They are led by the formidable Almoravid general, Muhammad ibn Ashur. Their numbers are vast, far greater than the army you can field. The city of Valencia, your jaw by the sea, transforms from a palace into a fortress once more. The mood shifts from prosperous peace to tense, grim determination. The gates are barred, the walls are armed day and night. The citizens, who have known your rule for years, now look to you not just as a ruler, but as their sole protector. Their fate is entirely in your hands. You are now in your late 52nd, perhaps even 60. By the standards of the 11th century, you are an old man. Decades of relentless campaigning, of sleeping in armor, of battlefield wounds and the constant stress of command have taken their toll. But the fire of the campeador is not extinguished. You are the heart of the city's defense. Your presence on the battlements, clad in your familiar armor, is a source of immense courage for your soldiers. They see their legendary, seemingly invincible leader, and they believe they can win. The Almoravid army arrives. A sea of banners and tents stretching as far as the eye can see. They establish their own siege camps, encircling the city just as you had done years before. The tables have turned. The hunter is now the hunted. The Almoravid strategy is aggressive. They don't seem content with a long starvation siege. They launch immediate, ferocious assaults on the walls. You are right there in the thick of it, directing the defense. You see waves of enemy soldiers attempting to scale the walls with ladders, their battle cries filling the air. Your archers rain down arrows. Your men pour boiling oil and drop heavy stones on the attackers below. The noise is a deafening symphony of destruction, the splintering of ladders, the clang of steel, the screams of the wounded. Day after day, the attacks come. The pressure is relentless. The number of your own casualties grows. The defenders are exhausted, but your will is iron. You move from one section of the wall to another, shouting encouragement, pointing out weaknesses in the enemy's attack. Your tactical genius as sharp as ever. You are a calming presence in the midst of chaos. Here's a small detail that highlights the brutal reality of defending a siege. The most dangerous points were the gates. The Almoravids would use massive battering rams, huge iron-capped logs swung by dozens of men to try and smash the wooden gates to splinters. Defending against a ram was terrifying. You had to lean over the battlements, exposing yourself to enemy arrows, to drop rocks or pour flammable material onto the ram and the men operating it. It was close, personal, and incredibly deadly work. This is your finest hour as a defensive commander. You use every trick you've learned over a lifetime of warfare. You organize targeted sorties, sending out small bands of your elite cavalry in lightning raids to attack the enemy's siege lines and then retreat back to the safety of the city before they can be cornered. These raids don't break the siege, but they disrupt the enemy's plans, sow confusion, and, most importantly, boost the morale of your own men. It shows them they are not just passively waiting for the end, they are still fighting back. Historians who analyze this final siege are unanimous in their praise for your command. You were outnumbered. Cut off from any potential aid, King Alfonso was busy with his own problems, and facing a determined, well-supplied enemy. By all conventional military logic, Valencia should have fallen. The fact that it held on for so long is a testament to your leadership, the high quality of your veteran troops, and the strength of the city's fortifications. But the siege grinds on, and the pressure is taking its toll, not just on the city, but on you personally. You are everywhere, tireless, a pillar of strength, but even legends are mortal. The Almoravid archers are numerous and their aim is good. The top of a city wall during a heated battle is one of the most dangerous places in the world. And one day, as you are on the battlements, directing the defense and inspiring your men, your luck finally runs out. You are on the main tower, shouting orders, pointing. The battle rages below. Your men are holding, but the Almoravids are pushing hard at the eastern gate. You lean over the parapet to get a better view, to spot the enemy commander, to find the weak point in their assault. In that brief moment, silhouetted against the sky, you make a perfect target. A crossbow bolt or an arrow, the account stiffer streaks through the air. You may not even see it coming. There is a sharp, searing impact. You look down and see the feathered shaft protruding from your chest. A collective gasp rises from the knights around you. The invincible Alcid stumbles. Your men rush to your side, carrying you down from the battlements, away from the prying eyes of the enemy and the worried gazes of your own soldiers. They lay you down in your chambers in the palace. The best physicians in the city are summoned, but one look at the wound tells them what they already know. In an age without modern surgery or antibiotics, a deep chest wound is a death sentence. There is nothing they can do but try to make you comfortable. Ximena is at your side. The warrior who has faced down armies now lies helpless. The end is near. Now, this is where the historical record becomes intensely murky and the legend takes over completely. The epic poem and later chronicles give us a very specific, dramatic deathbed scene. They say that as you lay dying, you gathered your loyal lieutenants and your wife, Ximena, around you. You knew that your death, as it became known, would shatter the morale of the city's defenders. The Almoravids would be emboldened, and Valencia would fall in a day. So, in this telling, you issue your final, most audacious command. You make your commanders and Ximena swear an oath. When you die, they are not to announce it. There will be no mourning, no funeral bells. Instead, they are to carry out a plan of almost insane brilliance and bravado. A plan that you, with your last breaths, lay out for them. The plan is to conceal your death and make the army believe you are still leading them into one final, decisive battle. Did this really happen? Did a dying Al-Said orchestrate his own posthumous victory from his deathbed? This is one of the biggest points of contention for historians. The skeptical view is that this is pure invention. A brilliant piece of storytelling created after the fact to give the legend a perfect, unbelievable climax. A dying man, suffering from a grievous wound, would likely be in no condition to devise complex military strategy. It's far more probable that he simply died from his wound, and the plan, if it happened at all, was conceived by those he left behind. The more romantic view, the one that the storytellers prefer, is that it's true. They argue that it is perfectly in character for Al-Said, a man known for his cunning, his psychological warfare, and his incredible force of will to think of such a plan. He understood that his own legend was his most powerful weapon, and he found a way to wield it one last time, even from beyond the grave. Let's lean into the legend for a moment, because the story is just too good to ignore. You lie in bed, your voice weak, and you explain the strategy. The Almoravid army is confident, but they are also weary from the long siege. They are not expecting a full-scale attack from the city. The plan will rely on two things: the element of surprise, and the terror inspired by your personal reputation. You will lead the charge, even in death. Your final hours are spent not in fear, but in careful planning. You give instructions on how the army should be arrayed, what time they should attack, and the crucial role that your body will play. It's a testament to the absolute loyalty you command that your followers don't dismiss this as the ramblings of a dying man. They listen, and they agree to carry out your last wish. As the sun sets over Valencia, your life fades with it. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, El Campeador, the Lord of Valencia, dies in his bed from an enemy arrow, with his city still under siege. For anyone else, this would be the tragic end of the story. A hero cut down at the last, his life's work about to be turned to dust. But for you, death is not an end, it's a tactical necessity, and your greatest performance is about to begin. Your last breath has been drawn. The palace chamber is silent, save for the muffled sobs of those closest to you. Ximena, your loyal knights like Alva Farnese, they are now the keepers of the most dangerous secret in Valencia. The prince is dead. The heart of the city's defense has stopped beating. The weight of this secret is immense. If a single rumor were to leak out, to trickle from the palace, through the streets, and over the walls to the Almoravid camp, it would be a death sentence for everyone. The soldiers on the walls, who are fighting on sheer adrenaline and faith in your leadership, would crumble. The citizens would fall into despair. The Almoravids, hearing that the demon who has haunted them for years is finally gone, would be filled with a renewed, unstoppable fervor. They would storm the city, and the ensuing sack would be merciless. You can feel the suffocating atmosphere inside the palace. Every servant's glance is a potential threat. Every whispered conversation could be a leak. Ximena and your commanders move quickly to lock down the palace. They announce that you are resting, recovering from a minor wound, and have given orders not to be disturbed. It's a fragile lie, one that can't possibly hold for long. Outside the palace walls, the city holds its breath. The fighting has lulled slightly, but the tension is unbearable. The soldiers on the battlements squint into the sun, looking for your familiar figure, and when they don't see you, they murmur among themselves. Where is the Campeador, or is he well? The commanders have to constantly reassure them, telling them you are busy planning the next move, that a great counterattack is being prepared. The psychological pressure is enormous. Imagine being one of your knights, having to walk through the barracks and lie to the faces of men you fought alongside for years. Men who trust you implicitly. You have to project confidence and calm while your own heart is breaking. knowing your beloved leader lies cold in the palace. Inside the Almoravid camp, they sense something is amiss. The ferocious defense has slackened just a little. The charismatic, seemingly omnipresent commander is no longer visible on the walls. There are spies within the city, and there would have certainly been someone trying to get information. They hear whispers, conflicting rumors. Some say you are dead. Others say you are badly wounded. Some say it's all a trick. This uncertainty makes them cautious. They continue their attacks. But they hold back from an all-out, final assault, waiting for clearer intelligence. This hesitation, born of the fear your reputation has instilled in them, buys Ximena and your commander's precious, vital time. Here we encounter a small, poignant detail of the legend. It's said that Ximena herself oversaw the initial preparations. She, a noble woman, a widow in the first moments of her grief, had to suppress her own sorrow and become the stoic, resolute leader the city needed. She had to ensure your body was cared for, not for a funeral, but for a battle. It's a powerful image of her strength and her commitment to seeing your final, bizarre plan through to the end. Historians who doubt the deathbed command theory often point to this moment. They argue it's far more likely that you simply died, and in the ensuing panic and despair, it was Ximena, your loyal general, audacious, who conceived of this desperate, brilliant plan themselves. They knew the city was doomed otherwise. They knew that their only remaining weapon was your corpse and the legend attached to it. So was the plan your final command or their grief-stricken? Genius improvisation, the academic jury is still out, and likely always will be. It's a debate that pits the power of a single great man's will against the collective agency of the people he left behind. In the quiet, candlelit chamber, the secret is kept. The city of Valencia is a powder keg, and the knowledge of your death is the spark. For a day, maybe two, the lie holds. But time is running out. The rumors will eventually coalesce into truth. The Almoravids will eventually grow bold. The plan, whether it was yours or Ximena's, has to be put into motion. The city's fate hangs on one last, desperate gambit. They must prepare the dead for war. The decision is made. The desperate, borderline insane plan will proceed. The scene shifts to a private, heavily guarded room within the palace. The mood is a strange cocktail of profound grief and feverish, focused activity. At the center of it all is Ximena. The epic poems might portray her as a weeping widow, but the logic of the situation demands a leader. And in this moment, she is the de facto ruler of Valencia. She gathers your most loyal commanders, the inner circle, men like audacious, your right-hand man, and Pero Bermudez, your hot-headed but loyal standard-bearer. She looks at these hardened warriors, their faces etched with sorrow and uncertainty, and she lays out the plan. Or, if you believe the legend, she reiterates your plan, becoming the executor of your final will. The Lord, she might have said, her voice steady despite the circumstances, commanded that we not weep for him, but that we win one last victory with him. She explains the strategy. They will not try to defend the city any longer. They will not try to break the siege. They will abandon Valencia, but they will not flee like cowards in the night. They will march out in full battle formation, at dawn, as if heading to a glorious victory, and at the head of the army, leading the charge, will be you. You can imagine the stunned silence in the room. Even for men accustomed to your audacious tactics, this is something else entirely. This is necromancy's military strategy. There must have been doubts, whispers of this being madness, a sacrilege, but their loyalty to you, and their trust in Ximena's resolve, overcomes their fear. They know it's their only chance. If they stay in Valencia, they will die. If they flee, they will be hunted down. This is the one path that might lead to survival. The plan is brilliant in its psychological depth. The Almoravids are expecting one of two things: another dogged defense from behind the walls, or a desperate, chaotic retreat. They would never anticipate a confident, orderly, full-scale assault from a besieged and outnumbered army. The sheer audacity of it would be disorienting, and the sight of you, El Cid, the man they may have heard was dead, riding at the head of the army as if immortal, would be a vision of pure terror. It's designed not just to break their lines, but to break their minds. Here's a small, logistical detail that adds a layer of morbid practicality to the plan, to make the procession out of the city as large and imposing as possible. Ximena gives orders that every single person, not just the soldiers, but all the men, women, and children of the Christian population will march with the army. They will carry the army's treasure and all their worldly possessions. This is not just an attack, it is a full-scale, militarized evacuation. This adds to the deception, making the force leaving the city seem vast and confident. The debate among historians crackles with energy around this very moment. Who was the true architect of this plan? The great man theory of history loves the idea of the dying Cid, a military genius to his last breath, dictating the perfect strategy. But a more modern, social history perspective might champion Ximena's role. This theory suggests that as a woman, her power was indirect but profound. She knew she couldn't lead the army in battle herself, but she could inspire the men to carry out this plan by framing it as your sacred last wish. It was her political and emotional intelligence, not just your supposed dying command, that made this audacious act possible. She transformed a desperate military gamble into a holy duty to their dead lord. The commandos, their doubts quelled, spring into action. The orders are given in harsh, urgent tones. The army is to prepare for a dawn assault. The soldiers are told that the Campiad or has recovered and has devised a plan that will crush the enemy. A wave of relief and renewed hope spreads through the ranks. They don't know the truth. They just know that El Cid has a plan, and his plans have never failed. While the army prepares, a smaller, more specialized group has a grimmer task. They must go to the chamber where your body lies. Their job is to turn a corpse into a commander. The final, surreal preparations are about to begin. The time for planning is over. The time for a grim and holy purpose has begun. You are now a witness to one of the strangest and most macabre getting ready routines in military history. The scene is a secluded chamber, lit by flickering torches that make the shadows dance. The air is heavy with the scent of myrrh and preserving herbs, a scent that fails to completely mask the cold finality of death. Your body lies on a stone slab. The first task is preservation. This brings us to a grim but necessary bit of medieval science. Embalming in 11th century Christian Europe was not the sophisticated art it was in ancient Egypt, but basic techniques existed, mostly practiced by monks. They use a mixture of salt, herbs, and aromatic resins. The body is washed and treated, not for a peaceful burial, but to delay the inevitable processes of decay for just a little longer, to keep the limbs from becoming too pliant, and to control the odor of death. It is a practical, not a ceremonial act. The real challenge begins now, making a corpse sit upright and look like a commander. A dead body has no muscle tone. It is a dead weight. Propping it up is one thing, but making it withstand the jarring motion of a horse is another entirely. This is where your loyal followers have to become morbid engineers. You watch as they bring in your armor, your familiar coat of mail, the polished steel helmet with its nasal guard, the leather gloves. They begin the surreal process of dressing you. It's a slow, awkward, and profoundly sad task. Lifting your lifeless limbs, sliding the heavy mail shirt over your torso. It requires several strong knights to handle your weight. The metallic scrape and clatter of the steel rings is the only sound in the room. But even in full armor, you would just slump over. And here's a bizarre detail that the legends imply but rarely spell out. To keep you upright, they would have had to construct some kind of internal or external frame. You can imagine your men, perhaps with the help of a blacksmith, hastily building a rigid wooden or iron armature, a harness that straps to your torso and back, with a sturdy rod running up your spine. This frame would then be bolted or lashed directly to the saddle of your horse. You will not be riding Babieca, you will be affixed to him, a human figurehead on a living vessel of war. It is here, in this moment of morbid engineering, that historians get into one of their biggest fights. Did this really happen? The skeptics argue that the whole story is a poetic fantasy. They question the practicality of it all. Could they really have constructed such a device in the middle of a siege? Would it even work? They argue that any rider, even from a distance, would be able to tell that the figure was unnaturally stiff, a doll strapped to a horse. They propose it's far more likely that a living knight, perhaps your standard bearer per Bermudas, simply donned your famous armor and pretended to be you to lead the charge. But the believers, the romantics, push back. They argue that in the chaos and dust of a dawn charge, from the perspective of a terrified enemy, the deception could absolutely work. The goal wasn't to fool a close-up inspection, but to create a terrifying, unmistakable silhouette. And that silhouette, the famous armor, the iconic helmet, on top of the legendary white warhorse was enough. The legend of El Cid was so powerful, the fear he inspired so profound, that the enemy would see what they feared to see, not what was actually there. Ximena oversees this entire process. Her face is a mask of stoic grief. She directs the men with a quiet authority. This is her final act of service to you, her husband, not laying you to rest, but sending you into battle. When the armor is finally in place, she might be the one to make a final adjustment, to ensure the helmet is set just right, that your beard is arranged to look natural. She looks at the armored figure, the man she loved, now a weapon waiting to be deployed. They secure your sword, Ximena, to your gloved hand. It's gripped tight fast with leather cords. They attach your shield to your other arm. The transformation is complete. You are no longer Rodrigo Díaz, the deceased monk. You are now the icon. El Cid Campeador, the undead warrior. Ready for his final ride, the men step back and look at their creation. It is terrifying. It is magnificent. It is heartbreaking. Now, they need your partner. They need the one who will carry the legend into the fire. They go to fetch Babieca. The deepest hour of the night, Valencia is cloaked in a nervous silence, a stark contrast to the cacophony of battle that has been its daily soundtrack. The only sounds are the furtive movements of thousands of people preparing for the unthinkable. In the stables of the palace, the groom leads out a magnificent white warhorse. It's Babieca. The horse has come, but you can feel a tension in him, an awareness that something is different tonight. Your body, now a rigid, armored effigy, is carried out into the palace courtyard. This is the most delicate and critical part of the operation. With immense care, a team of your strongest knights lifts you and hoists you into the high-backed war saddle. The sound is a sickening mix of creaking leather and clanking metal. They work quickly, lashing the hidden frame that holds you upright directly to the saddle and the horse's harness. You are now one with your steed, a grim centaur of flesh and steel. They adjust your helmet one last time, ensuring your face is shadowed, mysterious. Your shield is fixed in place, and your sword arm is positioned so that Ximena points forward. A silent, deadly command to charge. The illusion is complete. In the flickering torchlight, you look like a leader, poised and ready, waiting for the dawn. While this is happening, the entire Christian population of Valencia is assembling in the pre-dawn gloom. The army forms the vanguard and the rearguard, a protective shell around the civilians. The soldiers armed and ready, their belief in your miraculous recovery fueling their courage. The civilians, the women, the children, the elderly, the merchants gather what they can carry. This is a mass exodus disguised as an attack. They are not just soldiers marching to battle, they are a people on the move. A mobile city-state making a final, desperate bid for freedom. The plan calls for two main groups. At the very front is the vanguard, the tip of the spear, and leading them all, standing alone, is you, mounted on Babieca, the main force, including the civilians and the baggage train full of treasure, will follow close behind. A strong rearguard, commanded by your trusted Lieutenant Alva Fan Easy, will be the last to leave the city, ready to fight off any who might try to attack the column from behind. Just before dawn, the order is given. The great gates of Valencia, the ones that have been a symbol of defiance for so long, begin to groan open. The sound is impossibly loud in the stillness of the morning. It's a sound that carries across the field to the Almoravid camp. Imagine the scene from the perspective of a Berber sentry in the enemy lines. He is tired, cold, and has been staring at these same walls for weeks. Suddenly, in the half-light, he hears the unmistakable sound of the main gate opening. Not a small side gate for a quick raid, but the massive front gate. He sounds the alarm. The Almoravid camp stirs to life. Horns are blown. Men scramble for their weapons, confused. What is happening? Is it a surrender, a desperate, suicidal charge? And then, they see. Out of the darkness of the gateway emerges a single, unforgettable figure. A lone knight on a powerful white horse. The silhouette is iconic, unmistakable to every soldier in that army. It's him. It's Al Cid. Here, the legend adds a beautiful, eerie detail to enhance the terrifying effect. It's said that Ximena had ordered two knights with shrouded lanterns to ride slightly behind and to the sides of you. The carefully directed light would have caught the polished steel of your armor and the blade of your sword, making you seem to glow with an otherworldly light. They had not just armed a corpse, they had given it stage lighting. The historical debate about this moment is less about whether it happened, and more about how it was perceived. The skeptics would say that from a distance, the Almoravids simply saw a knight they recognized as El Cid leading an attack. The supernatural element was a later addition. The romantics argue that the effect was genuinely terrifying and strange, that the stiffness of your posture, the unnatural way you sat on the horse, didn't register as fake, but as something divine or demonic. Was it a miracle a ghost had their constant prayers for his death somehow backfired and made him immortal? For a few long seconds, you sit there on Babieca at the head of your silent army, a solitary, terrifying figure in the grey light of dawn. The Almoravid soldiers stare, their morning confusion turning into a cold, creeping dread. The man they were told was wounded, maybe even dead, is here, and he is coming for them. The trap is set. The psychological bomb is about to detonate. The moment of stillness breaks. A horn blast, sharp and clear, echoes from the Valencian lines. It's the signal. The knight holding Babieca's bridle lets go. The great warhorse, a veteran of countless charges, needs no further encouragement. He surges forward, breaking into a thunderous gallop straight toward the heart of the Almoravid camp. And you, a silent, rigid passenger, led the charge. Now see this moment through the eyes of a young Almoravid soldier. He has been told stories about you his whole life. El Cid, the Christian devil, the unbeatable general. For weeks, he has been fighting to get into your city. He heard the rumors you were dead. He might have even believed them. But now, charging out of the dawn mist, is his worst nightmare made real. He doesn't see a corpse strapped to a horse. He sees the legend. He sees the famous white steed, Babieca, his eyes wide, his breath clumming in the cool morning air. He sees the sun glinting off the iconic armor. He sees the legendary sword, Ximena, pointing directly at him. He sees a figure so resolute, so unnaturally focused, that he doesn't seem human. He seems like an avenging angel, or a demon summoned from the depths of hell. The stories were true. El Cid cannot be killed. Behind you, a roar erupts from thousands of throats as your army charges, wishing you are cousin to scare you. The battle cries of your men, filled with a mix of genuine courage and the frantic energy of a desperate gamble, sound like a triumphant host. The ground shakes under the combined weight of the cavalry and the marching thousands. The Almoravid front line, which was just scrambling to form up, hesitates. The psychological shock is profound. The sight of their seemingly immortal nemesis charging at them throws them into a state of utter confusion and primal fear. Their commanders are shouting orders, but the soldiers are mesmerized by the terrifying spectacle. This is where your reputation does the real fighting. The Almoravid soldiers are brave, zealous warriors. They have faced down the best armies in Spain, but they have never faced a ghost. Superstition was a powerful force in the medieval world for both Christians and Muslims. An unnatural event, an omen, could break the morale of an army faster than any cavalry charge. And you are the most unnatural event imaginable. As you and Babieca rush into their half-formed shield wall, panic begins to ripple through the ranks. The soldiers at the point of impact are overwhelmed, not just by the force of the horse, but by the sheer terror of being struck down by what they perceive to be a phantom. They break. They turn and run, and panic is a contagion. The fear spreads from man to man, from rank to rank. Here's a small, chaotic detail of the battle. Your horse, Babieca, is a key player here. A trained warhorse doesn't stop when it hits a line of men. It plows through, ticking and biting, in the chaos, with no rider to guide him. Babieca just kept charging straight ahead, a terrifying, uncontrolled force of nature with a dead king strapped to his back, carving a path of pure chaos through the enemy camp. Your loyal knights, following close behind, exploit the confusion. They smash into the wavering Almoravid lines, their swords and lances finding little organized resistance. The battle devolves almost instantly from a planned engagement into a frantic, one-sided rout. The Almoravids are no longer an army, they are a panicked mob, trampling each other in their desperation to get away from the ghostly rider and the ferocious army that follows him. The historical debate here, of course, is about the primary cause of the victory. Was it really the Ghost Rider effect, or was it a brilliantly executed surprise attack at dawn against an unprepared and overconfident army? The rationalist historian would argue that the surprise and the shock of a full-scale assault were the key military factors. The Almoravids were simply caught completely off guard. The Dead Cid story, they'd argue, was a legend created later to explain an already stunning and unlikely victory. But you, witnessing it, can see it's both. The surprise attack creates the opportunity, but the terror you inspire is the force multiplier that turns a potential victory into a legendary, overwhelming rout. The Almoravid army doesn't just retreat, it dissolves. They abandon their camp, their supplies, their treasure, their siege engines, and they flee in every direction, pursued by your triumphant, and probably very surprised, cavalry. The great siege of Valencia is broken. The mighty Almoravid army has been scattered to the winds by a dead man on a horse. The dust settles on a battlefield littered with the abandoned dreams of the Almoravid army. The victory is absolute, almost laughably complete. Your army, a moment ago a besieged and desperate force, is now the master of a field strewn with enemy tents, supplies, and treasure. But as the adrenaline of the charge wears off, a strange quiet falls over your victorious soldiers. They have followed their lord into battle and won a miraculous victory. Now, they turn to look for you, their leader, to share in the triumph. They find you, or rather, they find Babieca, who has likely come to a stop somewhere in the deserted enemy camp. Your loyal commanders quickly surround you, creating a cordon of honor, preventing the rank-and-file soldiers from getting too close. They gently unstrap you from the saddle, your stiff, armored from a testament to the surreal events of the morning. The truth can no longer be contained. As your body is carefully lifted down from your horse, the realization dawns on the nearby soldiers. He wasn't miraculously healed. He hadn't been planning in his tent. He was, the whispers start, spreading through the army not with panic anymore, but with a profound sense of awe. They had been led into battle by a ghost. Their victory was not just a feat of arms, but a literal miracle. This moment is the crucible where the man, Rodrigo Díaz, is fully forged into the legend. El Cid. The story is now perfect. He was not just a great general, he was a holy warrior, so beloved by God that he was granted one final victory even after death. The narrative is irresistible. But let's pull back and analyze what really happened. How did this bizarre ruse actually work? There are three main theories that historians and enthusiasts have been debating for centuries. The first theory is the simplest, the miracle or supernatural explanation. This is the version the epic poems and the most romantic tellings embrace. It posits that divine intervention was at play. The Almoravids weren't just spooked, they were supernaturally terrified by the sight of a holy warrior returned from the dead. This theory requires a leap of faith, but for the people at the time, it was likely the most common and comforting explanation. It validated their belief that God was on their side. The second theory is the psychological warfare explanation. This is the one most modern historians lean towards. It argues that the victory was a masterpiece of military deception. It wasn't about a real ghost, but about skillfully manipulating the enemy's beliefs and superstitions. Ximena and your commanders understood that your reputation was their most potent weapon. They didn't need a real miracle, they just needed the appearance of one. The surprise, the timing, the eerie spectacle, it was all a perfectly executed psychological operation that caused a cascading failure in the enemy's morale. The first soldiers who panicked did so out of superstitious terror, and their panic then caused a chain reaction that rooted the entire army. Even the soldiers in the back who never even saw you. The third theory is the purely military explanation. This is the most skeptical view. Proponents of this theory downplay the dead seed element altogether. Some even argue the story of you being strapped to the horse is a complete fabrication, and that a living knight impersonated you. They contend that the victory can be explained in conventional military terms, a brilliantly timed dawn raid on an overconfident and poorly prepared enemy. The Almoravids had grown complacent. Their guard was down. A sudden, full-force cavalry charge into their disorganized camp would have been devastating regardless of who was leading it. The Ghost Rider's story, in this view, was a fantastic piece of propaganda created after the fact to make an already impressive victory legendary. So which is it? The honest answer, which you'll hear from academics, is that it was probably a combination of all three, with the emphasis on the second. It was a brilliant military plan, Theory 3, that was amplified into an unstoppable rout by masterful psychological warfare, Theory 2, which was then interpreted by a believing populace as a miracle, Theory 1. Here's a weird little thought to consider. Perhaps the plan worked so well because even your own soldiers half believed the lie. They were told you had recovered, but they must have sensed the strangeness of the situation. Their own frenzied, almost fanatical charge might have been fueled by a desperate desire to believe in your resurrection. Their energy and conviction would have been palpable to the enemy, making the whole spectacle that much more terrifyingly convincing. The victory is real, but Valencia is not. The battle was not a conquest, it was a breakout. You haven't saved the city, you've only saved its people. The victory gives them a head start, a chance to escape. But everyone knows they cannot return. Valencia, the great prize of your life, is now and forever behind them. The euphoria of the impossible victory fades, replaced by the somber reality of the road. Your army is no longer an army of conquest, but a nomadic funeral procession. They have won their freedom, but lost their home. Valencia, the city you bled for, is abandoned. The Almoravids, once they recover from their shock and regroup, will reclaim it without a fight. Your principality, your grand political project, lasted only as long as you did. Your body, now finally released from its armor, is treated with the reverence it is due. It is carefully embalmed again, this time for a long journey, not a short battle. It is placed in a casket and loaded onto a cart. Ximena, now the undisputed leader of her people, gives the order to march north. The destination is Castile. You are going home. The journey is long and sorrowful. The column of soldiers and civilians, a refugee nation, slowly makes its way north along the coast and then inland, a journey of hundreds of miles through often hostile territory. They are protected by the formidable reputation of your army and the lingering fear from your last ghostly battle. Few dare to harass the funeral procession of El Cid. They travel for weeks, a slow, winding river of people and wagons. They are a testament to the loyalty you inspired. These are the men and women who followed you into exile, who helped you conquer a kingdom, and who followed you one last time out of its gates. Their final destination is the monastery of San Pedro de Cardené, a place heavy with memory. This is the same monastery where you left Ximena and your daughters all those years ago when you were first exiled. It is the place that sheltered your family when you had nothing. It is fitting that it should be your final resting place. You are brought into the monastery church with great ceremony. Your old enemy and king, Alfonso VI, even troubles to pay his respects, standing before your casket. He must have felt a complex swirl of emotions, relief that his most powerful and unruly subject was finally gone, respect for your incredible achievements, and perhaps a tinge of regret for the years of animosity between you. Here, in the quiet solitude of the monastery, your legend begins its second life. The soldiers who fought with you tell their stories to their children, the tale of the final. Ghostly charge is repeated in taverns and courts across Spain. Monks at the monastery, seeing the immense public interest in your life, begin to write down your deeds. These are the seeds of the great epic poem, El Cantar de mi Cid, which will be composed about a century later. This is where the historical figure of Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, the complex, pragmatic, sometimes brutal warlord, begins to fade, replaced by El Cid, the perfect Christian knight, the national hero. The poem smooths over the rough edges. Your service to Muslim emirs is downplayed. Your ruthless ambition is reframed as righteous zeal. Your final battle is presented not as a desperate, clever trick, but as a divine miracle. The story becomes better, purer, more inspiring. It becomes a foundational myth for a nation that is still in the process of defining itself. Here's one last, bizarre detail for you. A final strange chapter in the story of your body. You were not immediately buried. For years, your embalmed body, dressed in fine robes, was left sitting upright on a decorated bench or thrown near the altar of the monastery church. You were an object of veneration, a tourist attraction for pilgrims. People would come from all over to see the legendary El Cid, still presiding over his court in death. It's a slightly creepy, but incredibly telling detail about how powerful your legend had become. You weren't just a dead hero, you were a relic. The historical debate about your legacy continues to this day. Was you a Spanish patriot, a proto-crusader who fought to unify Spain, or were you the last of the great individualist warlords, a man who fought only for his own power and wealth, whose loyalty was only to himself? The truth, as you know better than anyone, is that you were both. In law, you were a man perfectly suited to the violent, chaotic, and opportunistic world you were born into. You were a devoted vassal and a rebellious exile, a Christian champion and a Muslim's general, a ruthless conqueror and a loving father. Your earthly journey is over. You lie in state in the cold stone monastery, but your story is just beginning. It will be told and retold, shaped and reshaped, for 1,000 years. The man is gone, but the legend is now, and forever, immortal. And so, the story of the man comes to an end, and the quiet of the monastery descends. The flickering candlelight on the stone walls seems to slow, the shadows deepening in the corners of the great church. Your own journey is ending for the night, too. The dust of the Spanish plains begins to settle in your mind, the clamor of battle fading into a distant, gentle hum, like the sound of the wind across an empty field. All the striving, the ambition, the victories, and the sorrows, they all melt away into the soft fabric of the past. There is no more need to plan, no more need to fight. The great horse, Babieca, is at rest in a peaceful meadow. The loyal knights are asleep in their beds, and Ximena, her long vigil finally over, can at last find her own peace. You can feel the tension leaving your own body now, a gentle unwinding, as if you too are being laid to rest after a long and arduous campaign. The world of swords and kingdoms dissolve, leaving only the quiet, the dark, and the soft comfort of your bed. You are drifting now, floating away from the shores of history, out onto the calm, silent sea of dreams. Let the gentle current carry you. There are no more battles to be won tonight. There is only rest. The end of the article. Good night.